What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved and genuinely humble actors gets pushed past his breaking point on live television? What unfolded on the Drew Barrymore show wasn't just awkward, it was explosive. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why Keanu Reeves walked off that stage, and why he may never return to daytime TV again. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment, because this story escalates with every second. It began like any ordinary Tuesday morning taping. The studio audience was buzzing, the cameras were rolling, and Drew Barrymore had that trademark sunshine-bright enthusiasm radiating from her seat. But no one in that audience expected to witness one of the most uncomfortable celebrity interviews in recent talk show history, an interview that left Keanu Reeves questioning everything about the entertainment industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Keanu Reeves, Drew announced, clapping with her usual bubbly energy. The audience erupted. Keanu walked out in his classic black suit, offering that quiet, humble smile fans know so well. He settled into the chair, adjusting his jacket, completely unaware of what was about to hit him. "Keanu, it's wonderful to have you here," Drew began, leaning in with a little too much eagerness. "I've been dying to ask you some questions I think our viewers are really curious about." "Thank you for having me, Drew," Keanu replied in that calm, centered tone that instantly fills a room with warmth. For a split second, everything felt normal. Then Drew started. "So, let's get right to it," she said, her smile widening in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been reading about your personal life, and don't you think it's kind of strange that someone your age is still single? I mean, most successful men your age have settled down." The question hit the room like a brick. Keanu's expression shifted subtly, but unmistakably. "Well, I think everyone's path is different," he answered carefully. "I don't see my relationship status as something that defines my success or my worth." But Drew wasn't finished. "Oh, come on," she pressed, her tone turning sharp under the disguise of playful banter. "You're Keanu Reeves. You could have anyone you want. Are you holding out for someone impossibly perfect? Or are there some issues we don't know about?" The audience grew uncomfortable. This was not the friendly, feel-good interview they had expected. Keanu's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "That's a very personal question. Not sure it's relevant to why I'm here. I thought we were going to talk about my upcoming film." "Oh, we'll get to that." Drew waved off, clearly pleased with the tension she was stirring. "But people want to know the real Keanu. Why someone who seems so perfect can't maintain a long-term relationship. Is it commitment issues? Fear of intimacy?" "Drew, I don't think this is appropriate," Keanu said, still calm but now unmistakably firm. "My personal life is not entertainment." "Everything is entertainment," Drew snapped back, her cheerful mask slipping for the first time. "You came on my show. You signed up for this." "No," Keanu replied, composed but razor sharp. "I came on your show to share a film I'm passionate about, to talk about storytelling, about craft, and to connect with people who love cinema. I didn't sign up to have my private life dissected for ratings." The studio went silent. Even the camera crew seemed to feel the shift. Drew took a breath and smiled this time, with no warmth at all. "Look, Keanu, it must be hard being the sad, lonely guy in Hollywood. The tragic figure who lost his girlfriend and his child and never recovered. That's the story everyone talks about, right?" The words hit like a punch. Keanu's face went still, completely still. Finally, he spoke quietly, but with a gravity that commanded the entire room. "That's enough," Drew laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "What do you mean that's enough? We're just talking." "No, Drew," he said. "This is what bad talk shows do. Good talk shows treat guests with respect, tell meaningful stories, and recognize the humanity in the people sitting across from them." "Oh, please," Drew scoffed, dropping all pretense. "Don't lecture me on dignity when you've spent your whole career playing the same brooding character over and over." "At least I'm trying to show people who you really are," Drew snapped. "You have no idea who I really am," Keanu said as he slowly rose from his chair. The movement was controlled but there was something in it that made the entire studio freeze. "And honestly, after this conversation, I'm not sure you know who you really are either." The audience didn't even breathe. Drew's face flushed red, whether from anger, embarrassment, or both, no one could tell. "Excuse me?" she said sharply, her voice climbing. I know exactly who I am. I'm someone who asks the questions that matter. Someone who doesn't let celebrities hide behind their publicists and their polished images. You're someone who thinks cruelty disguised as curiosity is journalism, Keanu replied, his voice steady and scalpel sharp. You're someone who mistakes violating someone's privacy for being authentic. The words hit with devastating accuracy. Drew's mouth opened. Closed, opened again, no comeback, no witty retort. The silence stretched, thick and painful, until she finally snapped back into the conversation. You know what, Keanu? She said, crossing her arms and leaning back defensively. I think you're being incredibly unfair right now. I'm trying to have a real conversation with you, not some sanitized PR interview. A real conversation, Keanu said, still standing, requires mutual respect. It means actually listening, instead of searching for your next opportunity to take a swipe. I'm asking legitimate questions that millions of people want answers to. Drew shot back, her voice rising again. You're a public figure, Keanu. This comes with the territory. Being a public figure doesn't mean surrendering your humanity, Keanu said, sadness creeping into his tone. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably. It doesn't mean every painful moment of your life becomes material for someone else's entertainment. Drew's expression hardened like stone. Oh, so now I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? She sneered. The millionaire movie star who gets paid ridiculous amounts of money to pretend to be other people? This isn't about money, Keanu replied, still composed but undeniably pushing back now. It's about basic decency. Something you seem to have forgotten in your quest for viral moments. Viral moments? Drew barked, standing up so abruptly her chair slid backward. Is that what you think this is? You think I'm some kind of desperate, click-hungry host chasing views? I think, Keanu said quietly, you've lost sight of what a conversation is. You've confused interrogation with interview, humiliation with honesty. The audience was glued to the unfolding dramaphones discreetly raised despite the strict non-recording rule. They knew they were watching something unprecedented. You want honesty? Drew snapped, her professional mask cracking down the middle. Fine, here's honesty. You come on these shows with your mysterious, gentle act, pretending to be this flawless gentleman, but everyone knows you're just a damaged guy who can't move on from his past. The cruelty in her words was so sharp, so unfiltered, that the room seemed to recoil. Several audience members gasped out loud. One person even half rose from their seat as if they might intervene. Keanu's face drained of color, but when he finally spoke, his voice was cold and steady as forged steel. And you think that pain is something to be exploited for entertainment? He said, you think someone else's grief is a toy for you to wave around on television? I think if you can't handle the heat, you shouldn't have gotten into this business. Drew shot back, her voice openly hostile now. Everyone has problems, Keanu. Everyone deals with loss. The difference is that most people don't get to hide behind this saint-like image while cashing million-dollar checks. You're right about one thing, Keanu replied, nodding slowly. Everyone deals with loss. But not everyone turns that understanding into a weapon. Not everyone mocks pain as if it's a punchline. Drew's face flushed scarlet. I'm not mocking anything. I'm trying to have an adult conversation about real life, something you apparently can't handle. An adult conversation requires empathy, Keanu said. It requires recognizing the person across from you as a human being, not just content for your show. Don't lecture me about empathy, Drew snapped. You don't know anything about my life, about what I've gone through to get where I am. You're right, Keanu said softly, the edge fading just slightly. I don't know your story. And I would never presume to use your pain for entertainment. I wouldn't drag your personal tragedies into the spotlight and parade them around like trophies. The words hit with precision. Drew's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, something vulnerable flickered across her expression before her defenses slammed back into place. That's different, she muttered. How is it different? Keanu asked. Because you hold the microphone? Because you get to decide whose pain matters. That doesn't make your hurt any less real, and it doesn't make mine any less deserving of respect. Stop trying to turn this around on me. Drew shouted. You came on my show? If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you should stick to action movies where you don't have to think too hard. The insult hung in the air, petty, desperate, and painfully transparent. Keanu looked at her for a long moment. The expression on his face unreadable, something between sadness and pity. "You know what's really tragic about all this?" he said finally. "Somewhere beneath all this, anger beneath this obsession with creating drama, there's probably a decent person who just forgot how to connect without hurting someone." First, Drew's eyes ignited with fury. "Don't you dare psychoanalyze me. Don't you dare stand there and pretend you're better than me." "I'm not pretending anything," Keanu said quietly. "I'm just sad. Sad that this is what television has become. Sad that kindness is treated like weakness. Sad that cruelty is celebrated as strength." "Oh, spare me the philosophical nonsense," Drew scoffed. "This is the real world, Keanu. This is how things actually work. If you can't handle reality, maybe you should go back to your fantasy movie sets." "The reality is," Keanu replied, "that there are still people who believe in treating others with dignity. The reality is that conversation should be about understanding, not conquest." "Understanding doesn't get ratings," Drew fired back. And even she seemed startled by her own bluntness. "And there it is," Keanu said softly. "The truth you've been dodging. This isn't about understanding me. It's not about giving your audience insight. It's about creating a spectacle at my expense." The admission lingered between them like smoke. Drew's expression flickered from shock to panic, to anger as she scrambled to recover. "That's not what I meant," she said quickly. "People want real moments, authenticity, not the fake stuff other celebrities give." "No," Keanu said firmly. "You meant exactly what you said. You just admitted that exploiting people's pain for ratings matters more to you than treating them like human beings." Drew's composure shattered completely. "You're twisting my words? You're making me sound like some kind of monster when all I'm doing is my job." "Your job is to interview people," Keanu replied, "not to traumatize them. Your job is conversation, not cruelty. Well, stop acting like I'm torturing you." Drew shouted, her voice cracking. "These are just questions. If you can't handle a few personal topics, maybe you're not as stable as everyone thinks." The audience recoiled. The cruelty in the remark was staggering. Several audience members gasped, and one woman actually stood up and hurried toward the exit. The idea that invading someone's most private traumas could somehow be a test of their mental stability was so backwards, so morally warped, that it seemed to fracture the entire room. Keanu didn't move. He stood perfectly still, eyes steady, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been all day, but somehow heavier, sharper, impossible to ignore. "There it is," he said softly. "The real Drew Barrymore. Someone who thinks questioning a person's mental stability is an appropriate response to being called out for cruelty." "I didn't mean it like that," Drew blurted out. But her voice had no strength, no confidence, only panic. "Yes, you did," Keanu replied gently. "And you know what the tragic part is? I don't even think you realize how far you've drifted from who you once were."
Ow.
Drew's expression wavered, the polished host persona cracking at the edges. "There was a time," Keanu continued, "when Drew Barrymore stood for resilience, for empathy, for lifting people up, for kindness, for hope." Drew's face tightened, hurt surfacing for the first time. "Don't you dare talk about my past," she snapped, the words trembling. "Don't use my history against me." "Not using anything against you," Keanu said. "I'm reminding you. Reminding you of who you were before you decided other people's pain was material to be mined for television." "Oh yes, you don't know anything about who I am." Drew shot back, but now her voice was defensive instead of forceful, brittle instead of bold. "I know enough to be disappointed," Keanu said. In the sadness they're real, Roe made the entire studio fall silent. "I know enough to recognize when a host stops seeing guests as people and starts seeing them as content." The room was frozen except for the low hum of the cameras still rolling, capturing a moment no talk show in history had ever seen. "You want to know who I really am?" Drew said suddenly, her voice rising in a desperate attempt to reclaim control. "I am someone who has worked unbelievably hard to build a career, to create something meaningful, to connect with people. And I'm not going to let some self-righteous movie star come on my stage and lecture me about my job. I'm not lecturing you about your job, Keanu said calmly. I'm asking whether you remember what your job actually is. Because right now, it looks like your job is to hurt people for entertainment. The job is to ask the questions that matter. Drew barked. No, Keanu said firmly. Your job is to create a space where people feel safe enough to share what they choose to share. Your job is to facilitate connection, not corner people into reliving their worst moments for ratings. Drew's composure buckled. She looked torn between doubling down or acknowledging the truth. People want honesty, she said shakily. They want real conversations. People want authenticity, Keanu corrected, not exploitation. There's a difference between someone willingly sharing their story and someone being cornered into bleeding for the audience. I never cornered anyone, Drew whispered. But there was no conviction, only the faintest hint of guilt. You cornered me from the moment I sat down, Keanu said. You decided before this interview began that my deepest pain was going to be your segment of the day. The accusation landed hard. Drew's face flickered through denial, anger, realization, shame. I was just trying to have a meaningful conversation, she murmured. No, Keanu said. You were trying to create a viral moment. And the saddest part is, you convinced yourself that exploitation was the same thing as journalism. Drew's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then finally, get off my stage, she snapped, voice cracking under the weight of humiliation. Keanu nodded once. No anger, just a quiet, deep sorrow. I was already leaving, he said softly, and then he turned toward the exit. I just wanted you to see what you'd become. Before I did, Keanu turned to leave, taking only a few steps before something made him pause. He looked back over his shoulder at Drew, who now stood behind her desk looking far smaller, almost fragile, compared to the confident host who had opened the show. I hope you find your way back to who you used to be, he said softly, because that person was worth knowing. And with that, Keanu Reeves walked off the stage. He didn't rush. He didn't look back again. The exit door closed behind him with a quiet finality that echoed louder than anything he'd said aloud. The audience sat frozen, stunned into silence. The studio lights hummed. The cameras kept rolling, recording every second of the aftermath that no producer had planned for. Drew remained standing at her desk, visibly shaken eyes, unfocused, breath unsteady as she tried to collect herself. For a long moment, she couldn't even speak. Finally, she managed to look into the camera. We'll be right back, she said weakly. But everyone in that room knew the truth. Nothing about this show would be the same after the break. What happened that day wasn't just a celebrity walking off a talk show. It was a masterclass in maintaining dignity under pressure, in speaking truth to power, in refusing to let cruelty be repackaged as TV entertainment. Keanu Reeves showed the world what it looks like when someone chooses self-respect over spectacle when they refuse to participate in their own humiliation. In doing so, he exposed something deeply flawed about the current state of celebrity culture, interviews, and the growing appetite for invasive, manufactured drama. If you want more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe. And tell me in the comments, how do you feel about celebrities pushing back against exploitative interview tactics?